All right, everybody. How we doing out there? Welcome back to another lovely Friday. It is, of course, Form Check Friday. The web series, the YouTube series, whatever you're going to call it, where we put your videos up on this screen behind me. We take a look at them and I give you my expert opinion on how we can pick apart, dissect these things. We talk training. It's all good. Stick around. You're going to learn a bunch. So we're going to dive right in with the submission that we left off on last week, and that is this guy over here. Now, his name is Davis. He's been lifting for a while, he says, working on technique right now. He says he can't seem to keep his back neutral. So he says the weight doesn't feel heavy. He's done 100 pounds more than this for doubles, and but he's, I guess, concerned about hurting his back. So this is 365 with what he calls it neighbor-friendly eccentrics. So there's a few things I'm seeing right off the hop here, Davis. Number one, you're way out over the bar. If we watch your feet throughout this first rep or two, your heel's barely even on the floor, right? You're way out on your toes. So number one, this start position here, when you pull yourself into the bar, we need to pivot everything back. We need you to take your whole body weight and lean it back a little bit. Pivot at your ankles so that you have more pressure through your heel. More pressure heels down. That's number one. Number two, your back is not rounding that much at all. I wouldn't worry about the amount of back rounding we're getting here. Number three, we got to watch these knees. We're not quite locking them at the top, right? We're kind of like leaning back a little bit, which causes the knees to unlock or causes what we call soft knees. So I don't know if you plan to compete. You didn't mention that in here specifically, but generally speaking, I'm going to critique these things to a competition standard because I'm a competitor. I know a lot of the viewers and submissions that come in from our viewers are people looking to compete. So, the next big thing, the reason that you're having trouble breaking the bar off the floor and maintaining good position and getting into a good spot when you're breaking the bar off the floor is because you're skipping breaking the bar off the floor. See that little tap and go madness? The reason they call it a deadlift is because we pull it from a dead stop. When we bounce the bar like that, we are losing the training effect of having to break the bar off the floor, having to create enough pressure and tension from nothing to break the inertia of making that bar begin to move. If we don't have that, we can't practice that. We're not going to be good at it. So that is number one. Number one is ditch those bouncy ass reps. Number two, just get everything back a little bit, right? Pivot yourself back on your heels so that your heels are down more. If we saw this straight on from the side, I bet we'd see your shoulder blade kind of out in front of the bar. And generally speaking, we want the shoulder blade pretty much straight up and down from the bar. Might be the one single thing in this plane of existence that we're in that I agree with Ripito on. All right. Karianne is doing some squats here. She is sending this in from Sweden, so shout outs to my Swedes. I will see you soon for IPF Classic Worlds. Looking forward to it. Karianne's been competing since 2018. She says she can't figure out high bar or low bar. She says she falls forward when she uses heels, like a heeled lifting shoe here. She's not in heels right now. These are flats. And she said everything moves slow and feels heavy, even when it shouldn't. This is a 5x5 around 80%. She said she claims to have 3 reps left in the tank, even though it doesn't look like it. So RP of 7. So the first thing I'm seeing here is it looks like we might be getting a little like crowded into the bottom, right? Depth may be a little inconsistent. She said she hasn't had problems with depth ever in competition. But I mean, to me, this looks a little bit on the line, right? Can we go frame by frame here? Oops, nope. Not that way we can't. Let's see. So that's like the lowest frame we have is here. And it's, questionable. But that being said, I think we're kind of getting, I would use the term bound up, but generally speaking, it might be that the anatomy and morphology of your hip might be a little bit more comfortable if you just widen your stance a little bit. A lot of the times we see this, things get kind of like bunched up as we get into the bottom. We have a hard time getting depth. We usually get popped forward a little bit if our stance is too narrow for our hips. And a lot of the times widening the stance up a little bit gives your hips a little bit more room to kind of sit into depth without, torso running into the quads and that kind of stuff. Now, conversely, for people who are feeling really loose in the bottom, a lot of the times narrowing things up can help them get tighter. So it is a fine line, and this is all anecdotal. I'm sure there are plenty of exceptions to these rules, but generally speaking, like your brace looks great. Your position looks mostly really good. We're getting a little bit of flexion in the low back here as we get into and out of the bottom. But again, I think that might have to do with the closeness of your stance. So the first thing I would do is try widening your stance and see if that helps. Other than that, like I think your squat looks really good. It doesn't look, what did you call it? Slow and heavy. I think there might be a little bit of like a psychological aversion to it. We did a video on self-talk and talked a little bit about how, if you kind of wind yourself up like this is going to suck every time you go to squat, after a while, it's not going to be that much fun to squat. So be conscious of what you're telling yourself prior to this session, during the set, even if you're like, oh God, that last rep was hard, versus like, I'm going to crush this. This is nothing. This is light. Those kinds of things can have a decent impact. So yeah, but we're definitely getting onto the toes a little bit. So you said you were doing some variations and stuff. I think pause squats, pin squats, tempo squats, all those are going to be really good. Anything that's going to help us focus on that bottom position, because we are kind of falling forward in the bottom. We're coming forward on the toes. The heels are picking up a little bit. So yeah, I think a wider stance is going to help with a lot of that. And then just working with squat variations that emphasize the bottom position for you. All right, next we have David. David's doing some bench. So he said he just got into powerlifting this year. This is 190 for 5 tempo bench. Now, tempo bench, if you're going to send in a tempo something, let me know what the tempo is intended to be, right? Because I have no idea if this is going to be a slow eccentric. Is it going to be touch and go? Is it going to be dropped through the bottom of the range of motion? Not sure I'm seeing much of a tempo here, David. That would be my number one critique, is that we start with a little bit of a tempo on like the first half of the first rep. And then the tempo goes out the window. And from about here down to your chest, the bar is in free fall, right? Tempo, 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 slow, slam. Tempo, tempo, drop. Tempo, tempo, drop, right? So when we're doing tempo work, one of the things we want is we want an even tempo throughout the positions of the range of motion, right? If this is our range of motion here, we don't want it to be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If anything, we want it to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I know probably a redundant demonstration of what tempo means there, but for some people it might be useful to remember that, think about that. Now the next thing is going to be when we do kind of like drop the bar, or the bar falls down and impacts you, we can see it actually flattens into you a little bit, right? So I've done a lot of back and forthing on this in terms of, should we bench with a light touch? Should we bench with like more of a sink and almost a relaxation at the bottom? And I think there isn't really a great answer as to which one is objectively better, but I do think that there are certain considerations. So probably what I would recommend is try benching with a light touch first and foremost, get used to that. And then once you understand how to decelerate the bar and how to control your touch, then you can think about touching harder and utilizing a little bit of like not a sink and heave, because that makes it sound like a sloppy technique. But you watch guys like John Keiko or Kaiko, however you say his last name. You watch him, benching, I don't even know, like 240, 243, I think was his best bench at 93 kilos. And he's got a pretty good, pretty hard touch, but it's not sloppy by any means, right? You watch a lot of the heavyweight guys, harder touch. So there's definitely a balance to be struck, and I don't think one is objectively better than the other, but I do think in your case, it's kind of falling on you, right? We need to learn to decelerate. We need to learn to be more in control. And lastly, I'm going to point out these wrists. You're super straight through, and when you're benching heavy, you're going to end up wobbling around and having a hard time with trying to keep that bar stable. Let your wrist cock back a little bit. Keep the bar nice and low in your palm, but don't try to be straight through like you're punching or something. I don't know. How do you punch? I don't know. But yeah, we don't want our wrists super straight through. We want them cocked back a little bit so the bar can rest a little more evenly in the hands. When you come down and you impact yourself heavily like that, I think one of the biggest things that is happening is we're losing our upper back tightness and position, right? Like I was saying, the chest flattens out, so we're losing arch. The shoulder blades are shifting around, so we're losing a lot of tightness across the upper back. And yeah, I think that gives you, hold on. The other thing you're doing here, look at that. Watch your thumb. You're actually loosening your grip on the bar momentarily even. So that tells me we're absolutely losing tension in the bottom. See that? Yeah, so you're even resetting your hands. So we need a little more tension, deceleration, and control in the bottom. Lewis. All right, Lewis. What do we got going on? Powerlifting a little bit under a year. Hoping to compete in the near future, weighs 230, 20 years old. This is a set of 2 and an attempted third at 90%. So let's take a look. I think the first 2 already happened. This is going to be the attempted third. Looks like you really psyched yourself at this point, man. The set's pretty much over, right? You're now doing like an additional single. Yeah. So couple things. Whoa. Wrong button. There. Okay, so this position. I think there's a lot of work that can be done in this position. Your stance is really wide, you're really toed out, and your knees are kind of coming in. So back position looks decent. Hip height, hip position, I think is pretty good. But this like wide stance with the knees in is really counterproductive in most cases. So what I would do is if it's comfortable for you to grip out this wide and have your knees at about this angle relative to your hips, I would just bring your stance in just that little bit. So when we look at you from the front, your shins are a little more straight up and down. Because right now the shins are pointed inwards, which a lot of the times means additional internal rotation at the hip joint. And when we have internal rotation at the hip joint during the start position of the deadlift, it can be really tough to produce force, to produce tension. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong or it's gonna, hurt you or anything like that, but just generally speaking, in the model that I've created from watching and critiquing, I don't even know, I was trying to think of how many lifts I've form checked by now. It's got to be, I would guess like 10,000 plus lifts. 20,000, 100,000, I have no idea. I'd have to look at it and like do some math. But anyways, I've looked at a lot of friggin' lifts. And I have a model of kind of the generally accepted ways in which I help coach people to lift. And generally speaking, yeah, that angle of the shins is usually less able to produce good force and be efficient than this angle of the shins. So if you bring your stance in, then your foot is here and your shin is straight up and down, as opposed to being this inward angle. And you'll notice on this third rep that it becomes very apparent before we pull this third rep, because I think you even widened your stance a little bit, right? Yeah, this foot is a little wider. Would you see how pronounced that knees in is here? Maybe part of why that last rep was a little bit additionally hard. So, yeah, I would just work on your start position. I think you're doing a lot of things right. So I think start position is probably the number one thing I would analyze and work on changing there. All right, this is Domingo, 245 pounds, about 80%. He says he's struggled quite a bit with his squat form and mobility. He's a hobbyist, no intent to compete. Just looking to get strong and stay healthy. He says he worries his depth isn't consistent. He says he's concerned with his back angle, whether or not he's too upright, and he wonders if he's going too slow on the descent. And you know what I would say in this case, Domingo? I think this is a case of, it's a very common thing that I see in a lot of lifters, especially lifters who tend to watch a lot of this kind of content, is I think we're overthinking it, my dude. I think your squat looks really freaking good, and I don't know if I see those same problems that you think you're seeing. We're gonna watch this through one more time, but it looks to me like we're hitting good depth, even from this like rear angle, which makes everything look high. This still looks to me like depth. Your back angle stays super consistent throughout. Your bar stays very well positioned on your back throughout. The fact that you slow down into the bottom position, I wish I could get more lifters to do this, man. I wish I could get more lifters to take a little bit more time and be a little bit more patient in the hole to produce a better position. A lot of the times we get wrapped up with like, oh, we got to hit the hole hard and get, take advantage of that stretch reflex and take advantage of that stretch shortening cycle and that little bit of elastic energy we get from like bouncing out of the bottom. But in actuality, it's like if you lose position like crazy, it doesn't matter how fast you rebound out of the bottom if your back angle goes from here to here. You know what I mean? So Domingo, this looks phenomenal, dude. This looks great. I honestly probably wouldn't even cue you to change anything here. Right? I don't think you're too upright. I don't think you're too leaned forward. And I don't think you're going too slow. I think Domingo, that this is a really freaking good squat, dude. I think your back's braced well. Your depth is good. Your position's good. Domingo, lesson of the day: don't overthink things. Don't overanalyze things. Be confident. And I think this goes to maybe a lot of lifters watching who are like consistently being, dare I say, a little bit neurotic about technique. Technique does not need to be perfect. The ideals that we're striving for with this whole technique critique and correction is consistency, repeatability, comfort, and efficiency. Now, there are definitely things that, are like glaring errors that it's like, okay, we got to really, break this down and take a look at how we're doing things here. But also there are certain things where it's like, yeah, he extends his back a little bit at the top and his back goes back to a more neutral position in the bottom. Should he be like hyper focusing on his bracing or something? Like, no, I don't really think so. I don't think so. I think he's good. And I would continue to coach him. If this was my athlete, I'd say, great work, dude. A lot of coaches feel like they need to say something. They need to have something to nitpick. They need to have something to pick out. Otherwise, they're like not doing a good job. And I get that because I used to feel like that. But more and more with my lifters, I'm just saying, hey, good job, great work, keep it up. I don't want you to add a bunch of cues to your list of things because I see something that I think might be, more efficient. And I do think you can overdo it, and I do think a lot of times people will come up with a bunch of bullshit so that they can sound smart and try to like produce value, when in actuality, the best thing they can do is get out of their client's way. Anyways, that's enough. That's all I'll say about that. All right. This last video is from Tanner. He's doing some bench presses, a paused single at 315 pounds. So he says he's got some issues. He's got some issues with over tucking his elbows, and you can kind of see it there. So let's watch through this one more time. He says he can't seem to fix it. So what I want is, if you're watching this video, I want you to go into the comments section below, and I want you to leave some tips. Have you over tucked before? Have you been one of those lifters that's like over tucking while they're benching? If so, how did you fix it? What ways of thinking about your bench helped you correct that and create that sort of new habit of being in a little bit more stacked position with the elbows, right? And real quick, before we sign off today, I just want to give everybody a real quick pitch, and I want y'all to head to the link in the description box below and go check out the Calgary Barbell Training app. It is a fantastic resource for people who are looking for a little bit more of an independent coaching option. It's pretty cheap. It's $49.99 a month. You get access to our private Discord where I do form checks like this on the regular. We answer all your questions. We help you modify the programs, and you get access to the 14 or 15 programs we have in there currently, plus a bunch more as they roll out. So if you're looking for a good coaching option, it really does help support the channel a lot. So I don't have to, tell you to go buy some underwear here. But yeah, go check out the Calgary Barbell coaching app. We would appreciate it a lot. It's calgarybarbell.programs.app, and the link will be in the description box below. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody, and we'll see you later. By this point, I might be almost competing in Sweden, so keep an eye out for that. IPF Classic Worlds. Ya boy in the 120 kilo class category. Redundancy. Anyways, bye.